Traditionally, language is taught outside of content. So for our early language learners, developing language learners, they're going to get access to language before they get the content. And our argument is that we can provide language through content so that students are able to experience the same content as their peers, learn the same material while developing their skills in English. We don't want to keep those separate. We want to make sure that our students have the opportunity to maintain the learning with their peers without being separated.
And we agree that all of this is done with a lot of support. So when you see them write, they will be given an opportunity to see the writing done interactively. When they're going to be talking, they're going to be talking interactively. Everything that they do is going to be supported by the teacher and through the interaction with their peers. So in this lesson we introduced a content language objective. So not only would students be starting with content, which in this case is thinking about the ideal characteristics of a wrecking ball, which have very specific physics content objectives, but they also have to then build in language. So the language objective also requires that teachers teach the language function of analysis, which can then be applied and practiced throughout the entire lesson.
I will use the language of analysis to identify ideal characteristics of a wrecking ball using manipulatives, argumentation, and small group interaction. All right, we're going to read that together in 3, 2, 1. I will use the language of analysis to identify ideal characteristics of a wrecking ball using manipulatives, argumentation, small group interaction. We want to know what is a pendulum and how is a wrecking ball just like a pendulum. So there's some words that go along with that. So if you look on the board up here, I've written them down so we can use them today. But all pendulums have a pivot. Does somebody want to describe to me what a pivot is? What do you think?
It's like what allows the pendulum to move.
Perfect. It's where it's attached, right? That's where it's attached. There's our pivot right there. And in an ideal world, it doesn't have any friction. That's why they said frictionless. It should be really smooth. You don't want it to bind up and stop that thing from swinging back and forth. So we have a pivot. So all pendulums have a pivot. A wrecking ball has a pivot. Okay, so some vocabulary for today. I'm going to leave it up here so that you can see it and talk about it as you're working with your group. So if you ever have a question, you're not sure what quite word you should use, you can look up here and take a look at it.
Students are given a lot of support in their argumentation skills with the sentence frames and the manipulatives, but they have to come to terms with what they decide are the most significant variables. So you'll see that students have manipulatives, they have small group interaction, and they have some graphic supports throughout the lesson to help them not only build the content, but also build the language.
Remember when I first started, I told you that we need the language to be able to talk about the subject. Well, the language we're using today is analysis, and the purpose is to analyze something. So I have up here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different sentences that we can use for analyzing things. So what I would like you to do now is tell me why a wrecking ball is a pendulum. So choose one of these sentence starters and tell your partner at your table why you believe a wrecking ball is a pendulum. Okay, so take a couple minutes to do that. Everybody at your table should have a chance to speak, okay? So just use one of those sentences, your vocabulary words, to describe how a wrecking ball is a pendulum.
We can interpret a wrecking ball as a pendulum because it has a pivot, a rod, and a ball.
Perfect. You have your lined paper in front of you. As an individual, I want you to think about 3 things you might want to change, 3 independent variables you might want to change. I've given you 3 already, so think about those 3. Once you have those 3, as a table, I want you to make a prediction.
So we predicted if we change the height, weight, or trajectory, it'll affect on how many blocks we knock over, or if we miss, or if we even knock any blocks over.
And our goal for every lesson is to provide opportunities for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So every day the students have an opportunity to do all of those 4 things in the lesson. So it's not just teacher talk or it's not just students working on a lab. It's interactive with high expectations for all students to participate. And we provide that with support, tremendous support for the students to give them everything they need so that they can be successful.
So you guys, for the final round that we're about to do, you'll have to decide what's the most significant. So we know the angle is significant. Was the weight significant at all, or you can control everything with just the size of the bob?
We could pretty much control everything with the size of the ball. Between the weight it had more destruction, but with the criteria that we had, we had to get less destruction but control it at the same time.
Sure.
So that's why just by itself with the angle works better than the weights.
Okay, so write that down. What is exactly what you just said? The angle was more significant than the weights. We really want the kids to be able to talk like scientists. So they will be able to not only develop language, but also they are stronger at the science content. We're asking them not to just tell us what they did, but they have to argue, provide evidence for what they did. And in the reasoning that they are providing is how they're taking the data that's right in front of them. As they document what happened every time that they swung the pendulum and they write this data down, they have to step back as a group and justify why they think they knocked over 4 blocks versus 10. So in that way, their reasoning skills is turning data into evidence, and they're really being able to argue just like scientists. So we're seeing that not only is their language development increasing, but their science content knowledge is as well.